Shalom, Yabashim Yoshe Barakatam, Salakia. We give all honor, all praises, and all glory to Yahweh, Bashim Hamashiach Yahushai. This is a presentation on the Gentiles. Who are they in the New Testament? And let's get to it. So, of course, the question is, who are the Gentiles being converted in the New Testament? A lot of the modern church, or the modern so-called church, says that the Gentiles being converted in, grafted in, is all the other nations and kindreds and tongues and all that nonsense that they spew. But it's been coming out recently that we're starting to understand that that isn't the case. We're starting to study a little bit more. We're starting to knowledge is being shown in the end days, as saith the scriptures, and we're starting to realize who the Gentiles really are. But in order to do so, we first gotta figure out what's the biblical definition of Gentiles, because the word, they kind of give it a monopoly, and they make it seem like it's just anybody who's not Israel. It can be any other nation besides Israel. So Gentiles can never be Israelites, according to the modern church. So the actual Hebrew definition of the word Gentile is Goy, Strong's H 1471, and it means nation, people, sometimes a non-Hebrew people, or usually non-Hebrew people, and descendants of Abraham and of Israel. So just by going straight from the definition, it's a very wide range of people that I can label. So obviously, the most well-known definition is of non-Israelite nations and people. But just with the definition alone, obviously it's not. It's more of a neutral definition. And the only way to actually to see who it means is by the context. The context will let you know what this neutral word is speaking of, because it's not, because you can see for yourself in the Hebrew, it's pretty much everybody. It can be everybody. And also, if we go to the New Testament, or the Greek, it'll be ethnos most of the time. And ethnos, look, it says a multitude. So just anything, it can be man or beast, just living together, a company, a troop, a swarm, so pretty much a squadron, an army, a multitude of individuals of the same nature or genus, so pretty much a family, a tribe, nation, group. So it's not necessarily saying anybody that's outside, or not only saying that it's people outside of Israel. So it's including pretty much everyone. But the same way as in the Hebrew, it says it's usually for non-Israelites. And then we know that so it's very similar to the Hebrew, to Goy. And the fact that it is neutral, the context needs to steer and allow you and kind of show you who it's speaking of. So we got a quick little glimpse on what's the definition of Gentiles in both the Hebrew and in the Greek. So then we go to what is an Israelite. And that brings us back to Strong's H 3478. And that's, in the modern Hebrew, is Yisrael. In the Paleo is Yashar Allah. Yasharallah. And it means, Israel means God prevails. Obviously it was a name given to Jacob. And it's also the name given to his descendants. And then sometimes it'll be used for the northern kingdom specifically. But it's Jacob's or Israel's descendants. And we know that, oh, in order to be an Israelite, you need to be born into it. So let's say a heathen woman, right, a woman of another nation lays with an Israelite man. She can bear an Israelite child, but she will never be an Israelite if she goes back to a heathen father. And an Israelite child will never ever be able to come out of the loins, out of the seed of a non-Israelite man. It's scientifically impossible, biblically impossible. It's just not possible. So pretty much the man decides who the seed, the patrilineal lineage, right? The patrilineal, I don't even know how to say it, but the lineage decides who's an Israelite and who's not, right? So if we go to Numbers chapter 1 and verse 18, we know that they assembled the congregation and just kind of doing a quick little census, right? And it says, and they assembled all the congregation together on the first day of the second month, and they declared their pedigrees after their families by the house of their fathers, according to the number of the names, from 20 years old and upward by their polls. So it says by the house of their fathers. And if that's a little vague for you guys, then we'll go up to another quick little example. It'll go to Matthew 1 through 17. I'm not going to read that, but it gives you the generation of the Messiah, who the world calls Jesus, all the way from Abraham down to Joseph. And these are all men. The only woman noted here is Mary, because it's the actual mother of him, of the Messiah, so she gets labeled in with the father being the reason, the connection from the Messiah to Abraham directly. So now that we know what's an Israelite, what it takes to be an Israelite, there's a big thing in the New Testament of the Gentiles being converted or being grafted in or grafted back in. And I'm just going to prove that it's actually Israel being those Gentiles, those quote-unquote Gentiles. So at one point in time, Israel was together. It had a unified kingdom. Everyone, it was keeping the laws of God. We were doing everything. But we fell off and we went astray. And we started acting like other nations. So we would be labeled such. Right? So that brings me to. So we start to begin to act and be called Gentiles. So there's a book of 1 Samuel chapter 18. 1 Samuel chapter 8 and verse 19 through 20. But the people refused to listen to Samuel's warning. Even so, we still want a king. They said, we want to be like the nations around us. Our king will judge us and lead us into battle. So right off the bat, they're like, we want to be like everyone else. We still want a king, so on and so forth. And we're going to jump to Ezekiel 20 and 32. You say we want to be like the nations all around us. Again, who serves idols of wood and stone? But what you have in mind will never happen. So he thinks it'll never happen, but that did happen. So, but that's just another example of other people, our people always wanted to be like everybody else, besides who the Most High wants us to be. This is the book of 2 Kings, chapter 17 and verse 8 in the NLT. They had followed the practices of the pagan nations the Lord had driven the Lord had driven from the land ahead of them, as well as the practices the kings of Israel had introduced. So the time that 2 Kings was chapter 17 was mentioning, we were following pagan nations, and then Israel had practices that they were introducing. So it'd be like the time in the New Testament, you had the Pharisees saying that washing your hand was a law, it was a practice. It was a law according to them. They had where you can go against your mother and your father for them, and that's obviously the Yahweh Shai, who the world calls Jesus, fixed that. And he said, no, that's not the case, and he brought out the law and he put them in their place and corrected them. So it wasn't just following the other nations. We were actually doing things that we shouldn't be doing. We're going to go to the book of Nehemiah, chapter 13 and verse 23. In those days also saw I Jews that had married wives of Ashdod, of Ammon, and of Moab, and their children spake half in the speech of Ashdod, and could not speak in the Jews' language, but according to the language of each people. So, the same way it happens today. You have a man, he lays with a woman of somebody that's not his culture, and then for some reason, people being mama's boys and stuff, that mama's girls, they follow after the other culture, instead of their original culture, whatever they're born into. And it happened back in Nehemiah's time, where they would speak the language of Ashdod and all these other languages, and they didn't even know how to speak Hebrew. So it's just slowly but surely becoming Gentiles, being like the other nations. This is the book of Ezekiel, chapter 14, verse 5. That I may take the house of Israel in their own heart, because they are all estranged from me through their idols. Keep this in mind, because it's going to be mentioned a little bit later on in this presentation, that us going away, being estranged, being like really the Most High is like unfamiliar. We're not connected, and it's through our the idols that we worship back in the day. Which brings me to the book of First. So then we move up a little forward ahead in time, and brings us to the book of First Maccabees, where it was the Greeks coming in and taking over and doing the thing. So it's the book of First Maccabees, chapter 1, verse 11. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen. So there was people in Israel saying, let's go make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So according to them, we've been struggling ever since we separated from them, from the heathen nations, from the Gentiles, in that context. So this device pleased them well. Then certain of the people were so forward herein, that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. So they were asking to do rituals that the heathens did, like Christmas or the Saturnalius, whatever it's called, that festival. It would be like, I don't think the Halloween wasn't there at that time, but it'll be all these different customs of the people that were over us. And we wanted to be like them, so we did that, and the king said okay, and we got a license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem according to the customs of the heathen. So in Jerusalem, in the capital, we built places just to do that, just to go off, to be wicked, to go after idols, no, the idols of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief. So that's kind of self-explanatory. We wanted to be like the other nations, and they allowed it, and then we started doing it. We're gonna stay in the same chapter, but go up a couple verses. Moreover, First Maccabees chapter 1 verse 41. Moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom, so everybody that was under him, he wrote to them, that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So everyone's gonna be like a one world order type of thing under him, and just forget everything you know. So all the heathen agreed according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion, and sacrificed unto idols, and profaned the Sabbath. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, that they should follow the strange laws of the land, and forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple. So he sent us messages saying that we can't even do the burnt offerings no more, the sacrifices and all this in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and holy people, set up altars and groves and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts, that they should also leave their children uncircumcised, and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanness and profanation, to the end they might forget the law and change all the ordinances. So they pretty much drowned us out. They made it so that they made it difficult for us to keep the laws. They just drowned us out. They drowned us out. They pretty much gentrified, so to speak. And then they went and they put their laws and they put their customs, and we just followed after them. And it got so severe that at some points they would kill you for even claiming to be a Jew, to even keeping the Sabbath. We would have to hide. We would have to do everything secretly. Which brings me to 2 Maccabees 6 and 5. The altar also was filled with profane things, which the law forbiddeth. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep Sabbath days or ancient fasts, or profess himself at all to be a Jew. So in the quote unquote New Testament, you will see people calling themselves Greeks, Romans, Ethiopians, so on and so forth, but they were actually patrilineal Jews, Israelites. But they will call themselves after all these other nations because we weren't even allowed at one point to call ourselves Jews. And even today, it's difficult because people would look at you wrong. They won't kill you, they won't do anything like that, but they will make your life extremely difficult to live if you realize you're an Israelite and you profess it. It isn't as severe as back in the day, but it's still pretty bad. So now that we know that the Israelites, we went according to other idols, other customs. We weren't even allowed to call ourselves Israelites or Jews. The whole point of Yahushua, the whole point of the Messiah, who the world calls Jesus, was to bring us back to the laws of God, to graft us back in. And let's prove that. It's the book of John, chapter 7 and verse 35. Then said the Jews among themselves, so these are like the Pharisees and stuff like that, saying, because they had a certain understanding of what happened to their people. They knew that there was a scattered and there was people around. So then said the Jews among themselves, whither will he go that we shall not find him? Will he go unto the dispersed among the Gentiles and teach the Gentiles? The dispersed, anybody that reads the Bible, any scholar, the simplest level, entry level scholarship in the scriptures, would know that the dispersed will always be the Israelites that got pushed away. So he's saying he's going to go to the dispersed, to the lost Israelites, and that's the Pharisees speaking. So they have a little understanding. Yeah, they went off, they did a couple man-made traditions and stuff like that, but they still had a better understanding than a lot of people in the scriptures. This is the book of Acts, chapter 5, and verse 31. Him hath God exalted with his right hand to be a prince and a savior, for to give repentance to Israel and forgiveness of sins. Mind you, I want to make a quick little disclaimer that in the book of Acts, chapter 5, the crucifixion already happened. They would say a lot of people would say, the modern church would say that who the world calls Jesus went to the Israelites, was supposed to go to Israelites, but we didn't accept him. And then he went, he gave the salvation to everyone else, and so on and so forth. So this is after the crucifixion, and it's still repentance to Israel and forgiving sins. That was his job. His job was to bring us back, because we went off for hundreds of years and kept getting punished and not learning our lesson. So he gave us pretty much the greatest gift and the only way to come back, the only door to come back, is Yahushua, who the world calls Jesus. This is the book of Galatians, chapter 4 and verse 4. But when the fullness of the time was come, God sent forth his Son, made of a woman, made under the law, to redeem them that were under the law, that we might receive the adoptions of sons. And because ye are sons, God hath sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So he's saying that the Most High, the Creator, Yahweh, sent his Son that was made under the law to get those people that were under the law. And you speak to anybody in the modern church, they'll tell you that the law isn't for everybody in the world. The law is only for the Israelites, right? Because they don't want to keep the law. They want all the blessings and rewards and all that, but they don't want to do what needs to be done. But right here, it's telling you that he's coming to redeem those that were under the law. And we all know, they know that it's the Israelites. And then he says that we, so Paul being an Israelite, he's speaking to a group of people, and he's putting himself with those people. And everybody that he's speaking to is his brethren, his kindred of the flesh that were under the law. And then, of course, only through Yahushua and through his Spirit can we go back. He is the only way. So I'm going to go to 1 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 2. Ye know that ye were Gentiles, carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. Remember I told you earlier to keep it in mind, I think it was Ezekiel, that we were carried away unto dumb idols. We were estranged, we were alienated, we were We did everything he told us not to do. And now we were Gentiles. Ye know that ye were Gentiles, carried away unto these dumb idols. I mean, that small verse, that small passage speaks volumes, because we know who he's speaking to. And he's calling Israelites. It says that we were Gentiles. So when I did the biblical definition, it kind of shows you, this verse right kind of shows you, like, it can be steered to be on anybody, on any nation. It's usually the other nations, but if he's speaking to Israelites and he's calling Israelites Gentiles in this verse, those are the Gentiles that the Yahushua is coming for. As we were carried away unto dumb idols, the Most High didn't know us. We're going to go to the book of Ephesians, chapter 2, and verse 10. For we are his workmanship, created in Hamashiach Yahushua, unto good works, which God hath before ordained that we should walk in them. Wherefore remember that ye, being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands, that at the time ye were without Hamashiach, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope, and without God in the world. But now in Hamashiach Yahushua, ye who sometimes were far off, are made nigh by the blood of Hamashiach. So he's saying you guys were once called Gentiles, but at one point called aliens, estranged from the commonwealth, because we know that there's a lot of laws in the Torah and a part of the contract that says that if you do so and so, they pushed you out of the congregation, and you couldn't even be there. Till one point, he just pushed the whole nation out, because we were all wicked. So, but through Hamashiach Yahushua, who the world calls Jesus, we're able to come back and actually be Yasharallah again, call him Yasharallah. It was just a quick little presentation on who the Gentiles are in the New Testament. Pretty sure the brothers got different other camps and stuff got different breakdowns and more examples that they can add to this. But this is just a quick little one for you guys. I'll say Shalom, Yahabashim and Shabrakatam. Yeah, Shalom.